In the stillness of the Qin court, where the emperor's word was law and the echo of the past was drowned beneath the clang of reform, a new order took shape. Not born of harmony, as Confucians would wish, nor of Taoist surrender to nature. This was order forged in cold statutes and blood-steeled unity. This was legalism, the austere, cold-blooded philosophy that carved the first Chinese empire out of chaos. Legalism did not win hearts. It conquered minds, subdued bodies, and imposed order with ruthless efficiency. It stripped away sentiment, sidelined tradition, and saw human nature not as noble, but as selfish, petty, and in need of control. And yet, it was legalism, not Confucianism or Taoism, that gave China its first taste of empire, laying the bureaucratic and administrative foundations that would endure for millennia. Today, we journey into the dark brilliance of legalism, the philosophy of iron that built the Qin Dynasty, redefined governance, and left a legacy both feared and foundational. This is not a tale of sages in gardens or poets at court. This is a tale of laws without mercy, of centralized power, and of how one of the most controversial philosophies in history forged the unification of China. To understand legalism, we must first understand the world that birthed it. The spring and autumn period, 770 to 476 BCE, had left China fractured into dozens of semi-independent states, all nominally under the Zhou kings, but in truth pursuing their own ambitions. What followed was the Warring States period, 475 to 221 BCE, a time of brutal warfare, espionage, and political upheaval that saw 7 great states, Qi, Chu, Yan, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Qin, locked in a deadly contest for supremacy. It was a world where power trumped virtue, where rulers rose and fell by the sword, and where the genteel ideals of the earlier Zhou aristocracy gave way to the cold calculations of survival. In this context, philosophies were not abstract musings. They were blueprints for statecraft, tested not in academies but on battlefields. Confucianism offered moral guidance, championing filial piety, ritual propriety, and the rule of gentlemen. Taoism whispered of the Tao, the way of nature, and urged rulers to retreat from interference. Mohism called for universal love and meritocracy. But these ideas, however noble, seemed ill-suited for a world on fire. Legalism, by contrast, embraced the fire. It looked upon the chaos of the age and declared only strong laws, absolute authority, and a clear system of rewards and punishments could bring order. Human beings, it argued, were not inherently good. They were self-interested, easily swayed, and in need of strict regulation. Compassion was weakness. Tradition was a shackle. Only law mattered. 3 thinkers would come to define legalism: Shang Yang, Shen Buhai, and Feizi. Each contributed to building an ideology that would sweep aside feudal bonds and personal loyalties in favor of a mechanized, impersonal state. Their ideas found fertile ground in the western state of Qin, a rugged, often scorned frontier land with a taste for discipline and a hunger for dominance. The earliest and most radical of the legalist reformers was Shang Yang, circa 390 to 338 BCE. Born in the state of Wei, but finding patronage in Qin, Shang Yang arrived at a court ripe for revolution. Qin was backward by the standards of the richer eastern states, but its rulers were open to experimentation, and Shang Yang offered a vision of transformation. He believed that the strength of a state lay not in noble bloodlines or ritual propriety, but in agriculture and war. If a state could maximize food production and military might, it would win. Everything else was secondary. His reforms, enacted under Duke Xiao of Qin, were sweeping and brutal. He abolished hereditary noble privileges and organized society into carefully monitored units, families of 5 or 10 households that were responsible for each other's behavior. Farmers were rewarded for surplus grain, and military officers were promoted strictly based on battlefield merit, not lineage. Perhaps his most infamous policy was the clear system of rewards and punishments. A peasant who informed on a lawbreaker would be rewarded. A family that shielded a criminal would be punished collectively. The laws applied to all, regardless of status. Even the crown prince was not exempt. When his tutor failed to report a crime, Shang Yang had the tutor's nose cut off. The aristocracy hated him, but the state grew strong. Under his reforms, Qin's revenues soared, its army expanded, and its people were disciplined. Shang Yang's legal code was rigid and impersonal. The ruler need not be wise or virtuous. He need only create clear laws and enforce them impartially. The state became a machine, and the people its cogs. Shang Yang paid the price for his radicalism. When Duke Xiao died, his enemies struck. The very laws he created were used against him. Accused of treason, he was torn apart by chariots. Yet his legacy endured. Qin had been remade. If Shang Yang built the structure of legalism, Shen Buhai, circa 400 to 337 BCE, provided its tools of control. Shen was less concerned with laws than with methods, specifically how a ruler could maintain authority over cunning ministers and powerful bureaucrats. He developed the concept of shu, or technique, the administrative arts by which a sovereign could manage his officials. In a legalist state, the ruler delegated power, but never trust. Ministers were to be watched, their duties clearly defined, and their performance constantly measured. Shen Buhai emphasized the importance of Xing Ming, literally, forms and names, the idea that a minister's title must match his actual performance. If a minister claimed to be capable of constructing a city wall in 10 days and failed, he was punished. If he succeeded, he was rewarded. This system reduced reliance on subjective judgment and ensured accountability. But Shen's view of the ruler was paradoxical. He advised the sovereign to be passive, even mysterious, to sit on the throne and remain silent, revealing nothing of his thoughts. By maintaining an air of inscrutability, the ruler prevented ministers from manipulating him. In this way, power was maintained not through charisma or wisdom, but through invisibility and control. To Shen Buhai, the ideal ruler was not a sage king, but a hidden puppet master, silently pulling the strings of a vast bureaucratic apparatus. The most articulate and systematic of the legalists was Han Feizi, circa 280 to 233 BCE, a brilliant yet tragic princeling from the state of Han. Stammering in speech but dazzling in writing, Han Feizi studied under the Confucian master Shunzi, who believed people were born selfish but could be shaped by ritual and education, and then took those ideas to their logical, draconian extreme. Han Feizi synthesized Shang Yang's laws and Shen Buhai's techniques into a single, chilling doctrine. He argued that the three pillars of governance were Fa, law, Shu, technique, and Shi, power or authority. The ruler needed clear laws, effective administrative methods, and absolute authority. Morality was irrelevant. Tradition was obsolete. The only thing that mattered was order. He scorned Confucians for their idealism. "If you try to govern the people with Confucian virtue," he wrote, "you will exhaust yourself without effect." People were fundamentally untrustworthy. Only fear of punishment would ensure obedience. Han Feizi's writings, collected in the text Han Feizi, were admired by none other than the future first emperor of China. But his life ended in betrayal. Serving in the court of Qin's rival state, he was captured and brought to Qin by Li Si, a fellow student under Shunzi, and now the chief minister of Qin. Fearing Han Feizi's brilliance might rival his own, Li Si accused him of treason. Han Feizi was forced to drink poison, a legalist thinker undone by the very politics he had mastered. Yet his ideas lived on, and soon they would find their greatest expression. In 221 BCE, Qin triumphed over the other warring states, bringing all of China under one rule for the first time. Its ruler, King Zheng, declared himself Shi Huang, the first emperor. He was not a Confucian gentleman. He was not a sage king. He was a legalist monarch through and through. With Li Si as his chief minister, the first emperor unleashed the full machinery of legalism. He abolished feudal fiefs and replaced them with commanderies governed by centrally appointed officials. He standardized weights, measures, currencies, and even the script, forging cultural unity from diversity. The law was supreme. Dissent was crushed. In 213 BCE, following Li Si's advice, the emperor ordered the infamous burning of the books and burying of the scholars. All Confucian and philosophical texts, save those on agriculture, medicine, and divination, were to be destroyed. Scholars who resisted were buried alive. The past was to be erased. Only the emperor's order remained. The Great Wall was begun as a project of forced labor, linking older regional walls into a vast defensive barrier. Roads stretched across the empire, built for imperial control. The emperor's tomb, guarded by the terracotta army, symbolized his vision, a universe ruled by an unchallengeable will. But legalism, for all its strength, could not inspire love. When the first emperor died in 210 BCE, the system collapsed. Rebellions flared. The Qin Dynasty fell within 4 years, replaced by the Han, who tempered legalist administration with Confucian ethics. Yet Qin's legalist legacy endured in surprising ways. Legalism did not vanish with the Qin. While the Han Dynasty publicly embraced Confucianism, its bureaucracy retained many legalist structures. The centralization of power, the system of merit-based appointments, the strict legal codes, all bore legalist fingerprints. Indeed, across China's long imperial history, Confucianism served as the moral facade, but legalism often remained the skeleton of the state. Rulers cloaked themselves in virtue, but governed with law. In modern times, legalism has sparked renewed interest. Some see in it the roots of authoritarianism. Others, the origins of China's enduring statecraft. In a nation where the collective often outweighs the individual, and where order is prized over liberty, echoes of legalism still resonate. But to judge legalism solely by modern standards is to miss its historical purpose. It was not meant to be kind. It was meant to bring peace to a land torn apart by war. And in that, for a time, it succeeded. Legalism is the philosophy we love to hate, cold, uncompromising, and indifferent to the human spirit. And yet, it built the empire that would become China. It raised the old to make way for the new. It replaced feudal bonds with bureaucratic rule. It forged unity from division, not with poetry or ritual, but with the law. The first emperor's dynasty lasted only 15 years, but the legalist principles that undergirded it, rule by law, administrative control, state supremacy, outlived him by centuries. In the great tapestry of Chinese philosophy, legalism is often portrayed as the villain. But it is also the architect, the force that shaped the state, defined the limits of power, and asked the hard question, can a nation be built not on virtue but on order? China's answer, in part, was yes. And so, beneath the flowing silks of Confucian morality, beneath the brushstrokes of literati scholars, beneath the serene smile of the Taoist recluse, there remains the iron skeleton of legalism. Harsh, efficient, enduring. A ruthless philosophy, yes, but one that built an empire.